Good morning again and welcome to Kingsway Christian Church. When I first moved to Appalachia to be a preacher, I met this wonderful old mountain woman named Trula. She was so wonderful to me as she was to everyone. I'll never forget, in my first week, she asked me to come over to her house. We sat outside on her small veranda, and then she poured me some sweet tea. I thought it was really bad Kool-Aid, but it's apparently how Southerners make tea. She said, "Now I'm going to tell you some things I've heard in the last few weeks in our church, but you should know something else about Southerners." She said, "Now look, we never eavesdrop. Never. We just overhear a lot of things." That's what this sermon is. You overhearing what God told me this week. So if you want to grab a glass of sweet tea, or for the Northerners among us, forget the sugar, just have tea, and overhear the conversation of God telling your pastor to stop judging people, well, you have my permission. Because after all, you won't be eavesdropping. You'll be instead overhearing the gospel of Jesus. So Jesus, of course, in the Sermon on the Mount, whether it's a bunch of sermons put together or one sermon, is a brilliant preacher. Sometimes Jesus confounds me, and I think, Jesus, I have no idea what you're talking about. How is anyone else supposed to either? And then other times when Jesus is equally brilliant, he does the opposite. And I know exactly what Jesus is talking about, and I decide it's about somebody else, but I can relate to it. We think, oh, Jesus, I know what you're preaching about. And then Jesus keeps on preaching a little further on all these teachings in the Sermon on the Mount. And instead of Jesus preaching about everybody else, you realize, oh, Jesus is preaching about me, directly into my soul. That happens a lot when you read the Bible. It also happens when you stand up to preach a sermon at other people and Jesus puts up a big giant mirror and you realize, like, oh, I'm in this with you. I'm in this too. Today's sermon is one of those sermons I think that we can all relate to, because we can all relate to being judged. We know what it's like to have someone take something we said or did totally out of context and judge us and hurt us and disparage us. And here's the thing. If you can't relate to being judged, here's a little exercise. Go to your local grocery store and either do this, wear a mask or don't wear a mask, and then, well, you'll understand. You would be laughing in the sanctuary. Humor's hard online, but it's worth a try. Perhaps this relatability to the Sermon on the Mount, especially these judging texts, are why we hear it quoted so often. We know how much it hurts and how bad it feels. We know how right Jesus is and how wrong our enemies are. And we quote it all the time. Don't judge me, don't judge me, don't judge me. Don't judge others, don't be judgmental. We know this verse. That's what Jesus said. And it gives us this moral superior high ground. We'll say, oh, Jesus said that. But here's the thing. When we quote something that Jesus says and it makes us superior, Jesus probably didn't say it, or we've misinterpreted it, especially us preacher folks. But Jesus says more than that. Sometimes when we relate so well to scriptures, when we're so used to hearing scriptures, we don't really hear them. In fact, like this one, we don't even really know what Jesus says. We just know what we said Jesus says. I had always done that with Matthew 7. Maybe some of you have as well. Judge others, and you get judged. But by whom? And how? And why? Let's look at what the Bible actually says that we say we're quoting instead of what we think it says. It actually doesn't say, you don't judge me. It doesn't say that anywhere. It doesn't say those three words at all. Actually, and because I have a little extra time on my hand, I literally counted them all in the NRSV. It's not 3 words. It's a little over 100 words. It's 5 fulsome verses with Jesus begging us to pay attention. Look more closely. Don't judge, so that you may not be judged. This is the first introductory verse of the teaching. It doesn't say, if you happen one day to be tempted to judge someone at some point in your life, of course not. It's a daily thing that happens to all of us. It says, when you're tempted, find a strategy to not judge. When it happens to you, not if, find a way to somehow stop doing it. And it's a really difficult teaching. In other words, Jesus is saying, Pastor Ryan, don't do what you did last week and the week before that. Somehow find a way to stop it. You're a preacher, for goodness sakes. And let's be honest, there ain't no one of us perfect at this. And I don't think Jesus is saying, get this perfect all the time or give up. I think Jesus is saying, look, all of us can get a little better at this. And some of us preachers can get a lot better at this. If someone has a speck of sawdust in their eye, do you really think you need someone to point it out? If you've got sawdust, my dad's a carpenter, and sometimes he doesn't wear goggles. I don't need to tell my dad, oh, you've got a bunch of dust in your eye. He gets it. I was running on the Green Line a few weeks ago, right during the middle of the day at lunch in Memphis. You don't have to be a runner to know how I was probably feeling in my body. It wasn't perfect and it wasn't beautiful. Now, yes, you are also correct. We were not 6 feet apart. We were not wearing masks. We were not using any kind of common sense because it was like 105-degree heat index and about 200% humidity. Plenty to judge. You get to practice. Here's the thing. In the very first mile, I got this tiny little gnat stuck in my eye. And then for the next 6 miles, for about 40 minutes, it just roamed around and around and around in my right eye. When we got done, Tom said, Ryan, I think you have something in your eye. I looked at him and said, thanks. That was sarcastic, by the way. Thanks, Tom. I didn't need to be told there was a little gnat roaming around my hot, sweaty eyeball for 40 minutes. Trust me, you know it's your eye. And then God said to me, you know, if someone has a speck in their eye, Pastor, do you really think they need your help pointing it out to them? Eyes are like egos. They're sensitive, squishy little things, and we all have them. But Tom, who I love, well, common sense isn't always an acquired thing. He didn't stop, as though I didn't understand. He said, Ryan, you look just terrible. Not your eye looks bad, you look terrible. I mean, he was probably telling the truth. I'm not exactly a model, but I didn't need to be told. Why though? Why do we sometimes feel the need, all of us, to keep pointing this out in someone else when they already know? I think this is why. It's not really why, but to whom we keep doing it. Because there are people in this world I could never imagine being judgmental of. I literally cried when I heard about Steve Montgomery's bike accident. He was supposed to preach for us in October. I was supposed to get coffee and cupcakes with him. I was sad. He's one of those people I realized I don't think I could ever judge. He was one of the first people to take me to lunch in the city of Memphis and welcome me, and we are really different people. I can't imagine ever judging him. Salt of the earth people. You have those people in your life. It doesn't matter what sin they confess to you, you'll find a way to contort grace and give it to them. And then there are the others. The ones who make judging come without any effort, just supernaturally easy. Frankly, there are some people you don't have to try at all. You can just wake up and judge them. Maybe that's just me, I don't know. But why? Why in both categories is it almost always every day the same people we can't judge and the same people we can't stop judging. I confess this to my friend. I literally did this at Whole Foods when I was getting my coffee this Wednesday. I like it because nobody's in there. I could walk in. I did wear my mask and get my coffee. I told her about my sermon. She looked at me, smiling through her mask. That's a metaphor. Ryan, she said, God doesn't give you any more right to be perfect than the rest of us. Then I realized God serves coffee on Wednesdays at 2 p.m. The answer probably has something to do with what Jesus tells us. The ones that judge me are the ones I can't stop judging. And I suspect the inverse is true as well. We see what we are looking for. We see what we go out searching in life. We see what we are looking for in others. We see what we are looking for in the mirror. We see what we go out looking for. We see what we've always seen before. But when that's not grace, God says this, at least to me, look again. I'm the one who made her. I'm the one who made him. I know it's hard to believe with a gnat rolling around your eye, but I made him. I sure did. And some things I made are going to be really hard not to judge. But that's not your choice. It was my choice to make them. It's your choice to love them. Your only choice is to find a strategy that helps you show grace instead of judgment. What you do before you judge is the key. What I do, the strategy I employ, or the lack thereof, is the key to getting this right or wrong. The heart you have before she even utters the first syllable that makes your eyes roll all the way up into your brain. The heart you have before he even opens his mouth. Because look, there are some people in this world who are never going to make this verse or this teaching by Jesus easy. They just aren't. You're not going to change them. They're going to always make this verse hard. You know who they are. They're in your life too. So to be faithful means to make a plan. Remember the daughters of Zelophehad? I don't remember all their names. He preached about them earlier. One was named Noah. One was named Hogba. The names I'm suggesting Pastor Sandra not name her children. Remember them? There was one key teaching that we learned from those obscure women in the Bible, and they shouldn't be obscure, because they say, have a strategy to get things right that God tells us to do. That's what Jesus is saying here. Let's look more closely. The NIV version of the Bible says this: why do you look at the speck of dust in your neighbor's eye? It's really not the best translation. The more literal ones, like what we read this morning, read this way: why do you see the speck of dust in your neighbor's eye? I think it's a legitimate question. Not why do you look, but why do you see? It's not really an accidental look that causes the issue. It's the deliberate seeing of what we've already set out to see in them. It's a predetermined seeing. A real question, I think, that Jesus wants us to consider. Not a question of grammar, but a question of grace. We know from the grammar of the passage, Jesus is preaching to every one of us. Literally, it says this, one word, translated, you know, judge. Which is exactly the first iteration of the 10 Commandments, how they're written. Yes, there's actually 2 iterations. I won't judge you if you didn't know. It's okay. You know steal, you know kill, you know adultery, you know covet. Really bad grammar in English, but it's what really fancy people call the Decalogue. In other words, 10 singular words, 10 words, Decalogue. Same thing. Jesus is not speaking in a conditional clause here. He's not saying if sometime in your life you happen to judge. No. It's when you judge, because all of us do it, you're hurting them, and of course you're hurting you. And if you're doing those two things, you're hurting the church that is to be the good news and is not when we judge. But of course, we all know cliches are fine when they're always true. Hurt people. So when you're hurting, when your body's hurting, when the gnat is in your eye or the cancer's in your body or the sadness is in your soul, when you are in pain, when you don't take care of yourself and when I don't take care of myself, we are so much likely to hurt others when we're hurting than when we're healthy. So we've got to do our own work to make this possible before she says the first syllable and tempts you not to follow these verses. It's true of me, it's true of all of us. Jesus knows this in the Sermon on the Mount and says this: when you get to work, getting that big old log out of your own eye, here's the thing. If you ever had a log stuck in your eye and you take it out, you're going to feel better. And when you feel better, all this judging others gets a whole lot easier not to do. But it's so much easier to stand up and preach than to sit down and do. It requires tremendous self-awareness and humility, which is a long way around to hear God say this: stop judging. It'll do the world good and your soul even better. Don't spend your energy finding justified ways to creatively dismiss your judging and call it semantically something else. That's not the point. Most of you are really bright and can figure out how to justify judging others and call it another fancier word. But you know in your soul that's not what Jesus is saying. Instead, use your energy to find ways to be a healthier person and have a healthier spirit and to like yourself more. Because when we don't like ourselves and when we're content to walk around with logs stuck in our eye and say, oh, well, I can't do anything about it, the rest of us have to suffer because you won't do anything about it. It takes a plan not to judge. It takes a strategy not to judge. It takes inner work not to judge. It takes preconditioning our hearts because God has said, look, you know who causes the problem. Figure it out. No one can figure it out for you because you have to transform your own heart with God and the Spirit that He gives us. You know who makes it hard for you? I know who makes it hard for me. That's not necessarily up to us. How we respond with our hearts will be how we respond, not only with our words, but with our body language. What's so convicting to me is actually not just what Jesus says, but what the passage doesn't say. Sometimes when I'm healthy, I'm pretty decent at not judging anyone with my mouth. I have sometimes a modicum of self-control, but that's not really what Jesus is saying or what Jesus means. Do not judge, you not judge, period. Well, good advice, the Sermon on the Mount doesn't say, oh, well, it's okay. You can have a really hateful heart and a really lovely mouth and it'll all work out. Even if you can do that, we're not being faithful. Judgmental spirits lead to judging others, however it may materialize in your own heart and in your own life. And Jesus says unconditionally, it's not only hurting your sister in an awful way, it's hurting your own soul. And you never get to be the only one who gets hurt. And until you find a way to change your heart and change your mind, it's going to continue. I think Jesus is talking about people here who we could legitimately have reason to judge. Or what's the point? Who goes around judging Desmond Tutu and Mother Teresa? I don't ever hear that. Jesus is talking about people who probably you could find reason in the court of law to judge, who have hurt you, who are in the wrong, who have sinned against you and trespassed against you and owe you debt, who make following Jesus difficult. The court of public opinion would probably say, oh, Pastor, you're justified in roasting them over the coals. Of course, they hurt you. You should put them in their place. And then there's God. And it seems that God would say something different. God is saying, at least to me, right, You got to get a different strategy. COVID and the coronavirus, they didn't start this in you, but they exposed it. And church, perhaps some of you understand my struggle as you drink your sweet tea and can hear and overhear God saying to you as well, before I judge next time, I'm going to do X. What are you going to do before you judge? That we might do it a little less and be a lot more faithful. Do something you didn't do last time. Stop running. When you get a gnat in your eye, take a breath, pluck out the pesky gnat, and the rest of it will be a lot better. Not only will you have more grace with others, you'll have more grace with you. In the name of Jesus, we say together, Amen.